It is storming like a mofo. It's not too bad. I mean, at least we could see. What's going on, everyone? Vega here for Serpent X Tech. And remember the FPGA that we just worked on where I neglected it, I guess, and got a lot of dust on it? Well, the fan, or the bearing, was going bad, and so I knew we needed to deal with it, and so we did. Well, that was last video. Now, unfortunately, the fan is dead, and we need to replace it on the FPGA. Let's take a look. Right now, the unit is off, but if you look very carefully, when I try to spin this, it's really got a lot of resistance, okay? But when we spin the other one, if I can get a good shot for you, you know, I could just do that, and it spins fine. But on this one, it just stops right away. But I have a plan. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have a ThermalRight fan. This is one of the newer fans that comes with one of their high-end, or I guess you could say mid-range budget option coolers. And even the budget option from ThermalRight is really good. And so this is the TL-K12, and it's a high static pressure fan. It's only 120 millimeters, but we're going to be using this fan on this FPGA. The game plan is to take off the GPU shroud and everything. We're not going to need this 6-pin to power the fans anymore, but we need to figure out a good way to take off this GPU kind of like shroud or cover on this FPGA from Osprey and just leave the heatsink. And you can see very carefully there's some screws in certain spots that hold the shroud and fan assembly to the heatsink. But we're going to leave the heatsink on, and then we're going to zip tie this guy on it, is the game plan. Now dimensions, it's 120 millimeter. It's 225 millimeters wide. It's only about 220 grams with wire included. Rated speeds 2150 RPM, you know, plus or minus 10%. The airflow 69 CFM max. It's a 4-pin PWM connector, and its amperage is 0.16 amps, or rated current, excuse me. 5 volt 3-pin AR RGB, so we have RGB on here. Anti-vibration pads. PWM control, dual dynamic balancing motor or bearing, and it's high static pressure. So I think this will work just fine for our needs. Wasn't too expensive. I'll link it down in the description. But and oh wow, I just noticed that authenticity tag right there at the top. That's pretty cool. So yeah, need to figure out how to take that GPU enclosure, plastic housing, and fans off, so that way we can put, or kind of zip tie, the 120 mil on it. First things first, unplug everything and get it out of this unit. Got the fan out of the box. This is what it looks like. It does come with, I believe, your RGB header. So it's a 3-pin, so keep that in mind. It's not a 4-pin, it's a 3-pin. And then your 4-pin PWM, good long cable, everything we need. We've got the FPGA right here, and we can see in between the fan blades where the fan actually mounts to the heatsink. So we want to disconnect it there, but obviously we need to disconnect this entire GPU housing, or I guess you say plastic shroud. Here's one screw right here. These two are just holding down the power or the PWM connector, so you know you don't rip it or anything like that. Looks like they got a power splitter right there. And just everywhere along the way, there's going to be places where I need to unscrew it. So I'm going to have to disassemble this FPGA all the way down because I can't access the other side. So I need to figure that out first before I proceed, which way I'm going to go. Because we got a screw right there. Looks like outer sides. And then after that, yeah, let's see, there's one right underneath here as well. I wonder if I could just take the fans out, leave the opening, and put the 120 mil over it, but I'd rather just have it sitting directly on the heatsink because we are hitting thermal limits when mining various tokens. So I will figure that out and give you an update. So far we got one fan out, and you can see the connector. It's just a dual pin connector that connects into the 6-pin header, and that 6-pin header is right here. And you can see how they're doing it, right? So it's splitting into two pins, right? So it's taking a 6-pin power and it's splitting it into two 2-pin connectors, one here The other one you can't see it, but it's right here for this fan. So one for each fan, 4 pins total out of the total 6 pins. But I'm at the point now where I can't get to that last screw unless I tear it all the way down, so I'm trying to figure that out. And of course it's catching right here on this lip of the I/O shield. So we need to take off these 2 screws, try to remove this I/O shield so we can proceed further. I don't want to break this bottom screw, and you can barely see it. It's like right underneath that lip there, but you can see how Osprey wired it, and there's one of the power connectors right there. You can see the black and red wire. So one right here to power this fan, then another one goes over here, and it's sitting about right here that powers this fan as well. And then you got your 4-pin PWM to control the speed and stuff like that, but basically providing power to both of those fans. We won't need that because we're just going to connect directly to the motherboard and control it that way. Well, I got the I/O shield out, and it wasn't just the 2 screws on the front, it was also the 2 that kind of get sandwiched underneath the back plate, and I did have to tear it down all the way even though I didn't want to. This is what an FPGA looks like. Okay, you see how big the die is? FPGAs are used for a lot of things, and they can help a lot of companies, military, commercial, or residential applications. Xilinx C1100, I talked about it a little bit on the channel and how to install this Osprey cooler, but just to get to this last screw is just a nightmare. Even if I took the FPGA off, there's not much room to get in there to get to that screw. It's really hard to see, so I'm trying to figure that out. It looks like it could come in straight from the top here. Now that the FPGA is out of the way, in order to access that screw, you might need to use the LTT screwdriver, because as you can see, the iFixit one bottoms out, so I need a longer tip to get in there. But then I'll be able to remove the heatsink, and I just need to reapply some thermal paste. So let me do that, and I'll bring you back. And now everything is cleaned up. The die is good to go. Everything has been slightly, like the heatsink, brushed off a little bit. You can see some of like the leftovers behind the fans, or the outline. Cleaned up with a soft bristle brush, blow it out with a little bit of air. The cooler, or the copper plate here, gets scratched up very easily. So in order to offset for that, we're just going to add some fresh Crown Knot Extreme thermal paste, and then just need to figure out how we're going to mount this thing onto the heatsink. And I'm pretty sure we're just going to use some good old-fashioned zip ties. But once I get everything back together, we should be good to go to just plug in the 4-pin into the motherboard and let the motherboard control the speed of the fan. Should give us enough static pressure to keep this thing cool. We were averaging around 56 to 58 degrees Celsius, so I wonder what it's going to change down to now. All right, it's together. We could actually see the copper plate seating, or right on top of that die. So no gaps, everything looks good. The only thermal pads are going to be on the back side. You can see one right there, but no thermal pads on the top, just thermal paste. Nice good seating, don't over torque it too much. And now it's just a matter of taking the fan and putting it somewhere where I'm comfortable, somewhere over the die, zip tying it. I might zip tie it to the copper heat pipes, which, by the way, this does have what looks to be 4 copper heat pipes, but it might just be 2 that go in a loop, is what it looks like. Or maybe 3 total, 3 copper heat pipes total, as you can see from the top here. And yeah, let's zip tie this thing on and get to working. Make sure it's hashing good.
All right, so the FPGA is up and running. We're actually sitting around 52 degrees Celsius. So I could feel the airflow coming off the backside, and unfortunately, even though this fan does have RGB on it, because this H81 motherboard from ASRock doesn't have an RGB header, obviously it's not lighting up or anything like that. But I do have the fan plugged in right here on that motherboard header, and I could feel a significant amount of airflow coming out the back side of this FPGA. So we're sitting pretty good, and that's pretty much it, man. Waste of this fan though, because without that RGB, I mean, it's only a couple spots, you know, the corners is what lights up. But I would probably rather use this fan somewhere else or in my main system than on this FPGA. But I just saw the high static pressure and I wanted to play around with the new ThermalRight fan, so I figured 2 birds with 1 stone. Either way, FPGA is up and running. Temperatures are looking a lot cooler. Fresh thermal pads, thermal paste, and better airflow. Either way, that's going to do it for today's video. So do me a favor on the way out, hit the like button, make sure to get subscribed, hit the notification button to stay up to date, as well as check out additional links in the description, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.